A text from an unknown number said, "Check your husband's second phone." I thought it was a prank. But that night I found it hidden in his car. My hands shook as I opened it. What I saw in his messages made my blood run cold. The next morning, I smiled at breakfast and said, "Honey, we need to talk about your other family." Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The notification chimed as I was setting the table. A simple, sharp sound from my phone on the kitchen island. I finished placing Marcus's fork to the left of his plate, aligning it perfectly with the mat before I picked it up. An unknown number. The message was brief, just 7 words. "Check your husband's second phone." I stared at the screen. My first thought was that it was a wrong number. My second, a sick joke. I had friends who would prank each other, but not like this. Never like this. This was crude. I deleted it. I put the phone down and went back to the stove to stir the simmering bolognese. The aroma of garlic and tomatoes filled the kitchen, a familiar, comforting scent. Our Wednesday night dinner. Marcus would be home soon. When his key turned in the lock, I had the wine poured. He kissed my cheek, his briefcase dropping by the door with a heavy thud. "Smells amazing, Val," he said, loosening his tie. He looked tired, but he always did on Wednesdays. Midweek, he said, the grind. We sat down to eat. The conversation was the usual rhythm. His work, a difficult client. My work, a client who couldn't decide between eggshell and ivory. We discussed the upcoming church fundraiser. It was all so profoundly normal. The deleted text felt like a distant, absurd dream. But it nagged. As Marcus recounted a story about his golf partner, the words echoed in my head. Second phone. It was such a specific, bizarre thing to say. A prank would be more general. "Your husband is cheating," not "check his second phone." "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, scooping up the last of his sauce with a piece of garlic bread. "You seem distracted." "Just thinking about fabric swatches," I lied, smiling. "It's a big living room. She needs a statement piece." He nodded, satisfied. He never questioned my work details. He saw my career as a pleasant hobby, something to keep me occupied and our homes beautiful. After dinner, he retired to his study to crunch some numbers. I cleared the plates. The routine was a well-worn path. Wash dishes, wipe counters, check the calendar for tomorrow. But my hands moved automatically while my mind raced. A second phone? It was preposterous. Marcus was a creature of habit. He had his laptop, his tablet, his one iPhone that was constantly attached to his hand. The idea of him managing another device, another number, another set of contacts, it spoke of a level of duplicity I couldn't attach to the man I'd shared a bed with for 15 years. But the seed was planted. It grew in the quiet of the empty kitchen. I knew I wouldn't sleep. I went through the motions of our evening. I brought him a cup of tea at 10. He was on a conference call, he whispered, pointing to his headset. I nodded and left. I got ready for bed, washed my face, applied my moisturizer. I lay in the dark, listening to the faint murmur of his voice down the hall. At midnight, the house was silent. His breathing beside me was deep and even. I slipped out of bed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I put on my robe and walked downstairs, each step careful on the creaky oak. The garage was cold and smelled of concrete and motor oil. His car, a sleek black sedan, sat in its spot. I clicked the fob from the hook by the door. The interior lights came on, polite and bright. I stood there for a long minute, feeling foolish. What was I looking for? Where does one hide a second phone? I started with the obvious. The glove compartment. Manuals, registration, a pack of gum. The center console. More gum, loose change, a pair of sunglasses. I felt under the seats. My fingers brushed against crumbs and a lost pen. Nothing. I sat in the driver's seat, the leather cold through my thin pajamas. Think, if not for convenience, then for security. Somewhere he wouldn't accidentally reveal it. Somewhere separate. My eyes went to the trunk release. I got out, opened the trunk. It was neat, containing just a roadside emergency kit and a gym bag. I lifted the floor panel to access the spare tire. There it was, tucked not with the tire, but in a narrow, shallow depression to the side, almost invisible. A slim, black smartphone. Cheap, generic, it felt cold and alien in my hand. I took it and the car fobbed back into the house, locking the garage door behind me. I didn't go to the bedroom. I went to my sitting room, my small sanctuary at the back of the house. I turned on one lamp. The phone was password protected, a 4-digit code. My fingers were trembling. I tried his birthday. No, our anniversary. No, the last 4 of his social. No, I leaned back, staring at this secret object. Then I tried the code he used for everything he considered unimportant, the code he laughed about because it was so simple. 1234. The home screen unlocked. The world did not shatter with a sound. It dissolved into a silent, pixelated horror. The messaging app was open. I scrolled. The top thread was with a name, Denise. The messages were not romantic poetry. They were the mundane architecture of a shared life. They were more devastating for their normalcy. Did you deposit the money? Denise. Yes, check the joint account. School fees are due next week. Marcus. Lucas has a dentist apt Thursday. Can you take him? Denise. I'll rearrange my schedule. Send me the time. Marcus. He misses you. Asked when you're coming for a whole weekend again. Denise. Soon, things are busy here, soon. Marcus. There were photos. A boy grinning with a gap-toothed smile holding a trophy. Lucas. He had Marcus's eyes. A picture of a woman, Denise I presumed, smiling at the camera in a park. Another of a modest house with a tricycle in the driveway. I scrolled back through months, then years. The timeline laid itself out with clinical clarity. Business trips that were not business trips. Late nights at the office. Weekend golf tournaments. All of it mapped perfectly onto this other existence. Financial transfers. Discussions about a mortgage. Plans for a summer vacation to the beach. I read until the words blurred. My tears fell onto the screen, smearing the images of a family that was not mine. I sat on the floor of my beautifully decorated sitting room, my back against the settee, the glow of the secret phone illuminating my face in the dim light. The man sleeping upstairs was a stranger. The life I had been living was a fiction, a set I had designed and maintained for an audience of one, while he played a lead role in a completely different production. I felt a hollowing out, a vacuum where my heart had been. Then, slowly, it began to fill with something else. Not just pain, but a cold, hard certainty. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my robe. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I carefully placed the phone on the coffee table. I would not cry again, not here, not now. The next move was mine. He did not know I knew. That was my only advantage. I sat in the quiet dark, the evidence of my oblivion glowing before me, and I began to think. The grief would come, a wave I would have to withstand. But first, I needed to understand the full shape of the lie. I needed to be smart. I needed to be careful. I picked up the phone again. I scrolled to the banking app. I noted the account numbers. I opened the photo gallery and began methodically saving pictures to a cloud drive he could not access. I worked with a focus I usually reserved for complex design schemes, my emotions packed away into a locked room inside me. The wife was shattered, but the strategist, the survivor, was just waking up. When the first gray light of dawn touched the windows, I had documented everything. I returned the phone to its hiding place in the car. I remade the bed on my side and lay down, staring at the ceiling. I listened to Marcus's steady breathing. When his alarm went off, I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. The alarm ceased and Marcus shifted beside me. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing slow and measured. I felt the weight of the mattress lift as he got up. The bathroom door closed and the shower started. Only then did I open my eyes. The ceiling was still there, white and blank. My body felt heavy, as if filled with wet sand. But my mind was clear, and it was already separating from the raw feeling in my chest. The feeling was the wife's problem. The mind was the strategist's tool. I got up and put on my robe. I went through my morning routine by rote. Brush teeth, wash face, apply a light moisturizer. I looked at my reflection. The woman there looked tired, but no more than usual after a restless night. The eyes were a bit puffy, but that could be attributed to allergies. I nodded at her. We had a performance to maintain. In the kitchen, I moved with automatic efficiency. The coffee machine gurgled. I squeezed fresh orange juice. I set out the butter to soften. Sunday was our big breakfast day, a tradition for 15 years. Pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs. The table in the sunlit nook was set with our good china, the kind with the delicate blue border. I placed everything precisely. Marcus entered, dressed in his Sunday slacks and a polo shirt. He smelled of soap and his sandalwood cologne. He kissed the top of my head. "Something smells good." "Just the usual," I said, my voice pleasant and even. I poured his coffee, adding 1 sugar and a splash of cream just as he liked it. I placed the cup in front of him. "You're up early," he remarked, scrolling through news on his phone. "Couldn't sleep much," I admitted, which was true. I turned back to the stove, pouring batter onto the griddle. My mind was racing, work stuff. Also true in a way. "You work too hard," he said, not looking up from his screen. I brought the platter of food to the table and sat across from him. The sun streamed in, highlighting the dust motes in the air. It was a picture of domestic peace. I watched him serve himself, his movements familiar and relaxed. He was utterly at ease in his kingdom. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I cut my pancake into small, neat squares. I took a sip of juice. The cold tartness grounded me. "I got a strange text yesterday," I said, my tone conversational light. He glanced up, his mouth full. "Oh yeah, from who?" "Unknown number." I took another bite, chewed, swallowed. It was odd, just said, "Check your husband's second phone." I allowed a small, bewildered laugh to escape. Can you imagine? I deleted it immediately. Some people have too much time on their hands. I watched his face. The change was not dramatic. There was no gasp, no dropped fork. It was a subtle freezing. The hand holding his coffee cup paused midway to his mouth. His eyes, which had been casually meeting mine, flickered away for a fraction of a second too long. He took a slow sip, buying time. "That's bizarre," he said, finally setting the cup down. The clink asterisk against the saucer was a little too sharp. "A prank, I guess, probably meant for someone else." "That's what I thought," I agreed, nodding. I spread butter on a square of pancake. "I mean, a second phone, that's so elaborate, like something from a spy movie." I looked at him directly, my head tilted in amused curiosity. "You don't have a second phone, do you, Marcus?" He laughed. It was a good laugh, warm and dismissive, but I saw the tightness at the corners of his eyes. "What would I need that for? This one is enough of a headache." He tapped his iPhone on the table. "I know, right?" I said, joining his laughter, a soft, agreeable sound. It just struck me as so specific and cruel. "People are cruel," he said, his voice regaining its full, confident timbre. He reached across the table and patted my hand. "Don't let some idiot with a burner phone ruin your Sunday, baby." His touch was like a brand. I fought the instinct to flinch. Instead, I turned my hand over and gave his a gentle squeeze. "You're right, it's nothing." He finished his breakfast with renewed gusto, the moment having passed. He launched into a story about a colleague's disastrous presentation. I listened, nodded, smiled at the right moments. The perfect audience. Inside, I was ice. His reaction had confirmed everything. The micro-hesitation, the forced laugh, the quick pivot to reassurance, they were the tells of a man whose secret had just been lightly tapped on. He wasn't scared yet. He was cautious. He believed he had contained it. He thought I was the same trusting Val, easily placated. After breakfast, he went to get dressed for church. I cleared the table. My hands were steady as I stacked the plates. The performance had been a success. I had learned what I needed to know. He was aware of the risk, but he felt secure. He believed the mask was still firmly in place. I loaded the dishwasher. I wiped the table. I looked out at the sunny backyard, the manicured lawn, the expensive patio furniture. It all looked like a stage set to me now, a beautiful, empty facade. When I went upstairs to change, I paused outside his study. The door was ajar. He was inside, not getting dressed. His back was to me. He was holding his personal iPhone to his ear. "No, nothing," he was saying, his voice low. "Just a stupid text. She mentioned it. I handled it, yeah, I'm sure. Don't worry about it, I said I'll handle it." He was talking to her, to Denise. Handling it. I felt a fresh wave of that cold certainty. He was not apologetic. He He was managing a problem. I was a problem to be managed. I continued to our bedroom and put on my navy blue dress. The one he said made me look elegant. I fastened my pearls. I looked the part of the cherished wife. When we walked out the door together, his hand on the small of my back, anyone seeing us would have seen a perfect couple. In the car on the way to church, he was quiet. I stared out the window at the passing houses, each one a similar portrait of curated success. "You're sure you're okay about that text?" he asked, breaking the silence. I turned to him with a serene smile. "Of course, it was nothing, like you said, just a prank." I reached over and adjusted his collar. "Don't give it another thought." He smiled back, relieved. The mask was back, snug and secure for both of us. But mine was different now. His was a shield to hide deception. Mine was a weapon, and I was just beginning to learn how to wield it. The first move was complete. He knew I had received the text. He thought he had neutralized the threat. He had no idea that the threat was now sitting beside him, smiling, planning, and already 2 steps ahead. The service ended with a final hymn. I stood between Marcus and Mrs. Henderson from 3 doors down, my lips moving to the words I knew by heart. My voice did not shake. My hands were clasped neatly in front of me. When we filed out into the bright Sunday noon, I accepted compliments on my dress, asked about grandchildren, and promised to bring my famous peach cobbler to the next potluck. Marcus shook hands with the pastor, discussing the church roof fund. We were a portrait of unity. In the car, the facade held. "Lunch at the club," Marcus suggested, as he often did. "I'd love to," I said, then manufactured a slight wince. "But I have a splitting headache coming on. All that sunlight through the stained glass, I think. Would you mind terribly if I just went home? I might lie down." Concern washed over his features, the good husband. "Of course, baby. I can grab a sandwich at the club and bring you some soup." No, you go. Enjoy your round of golf with the guys. I just need quiet." I touched his arm. "Really?" He agreed with reassuring ease. A quiet wife at home was a predictable wife. A wife at the club might ask questions, might observe his interactions. My absence suited him. He dropped me off at the house with another kiss on the forehead. I waited until his car turned the corner before I moved. I did not go inside. I went to the garage and got into my own car. I didn't have a destination until I was already driving. My hands on the wheel were steady, but a pressure was building behind my eyes, in my throat. I couldn't go home to that empty stage set. I couldn't sit with the silence and the proof on my cloud drive. My car seemed to drive itself to a familiar tree-lined street, to a modest, well-kept bungalow with a riot of flowers in the front garden. Ellie's house. I parked and walked to the door. I hadn't called. It didn't matter. Ellie opened the door before I could knock. She took one look at my face, my perfectly composed, church-going face, and her own sharp, knowing eyes softened. She didn't ask a single question. She simply stepped back and said, "Get in here." The smell of her house was always the same: lemon polish, old books, and whatever she'd last baked. It was the antithesis of my own sterile, designed home. It was lived in, real. She led me to her kitchen, a warm room with yellow cabinets and a scarred wooden table littered with mail and a half-completed crossword. "Sit," she commanded, filling a kettle at the sink. "Tea, then talk or don't talk, but sit." I sat. I watched her move, efficient and calm. She was in her mid-60s, her hair a cap of sleek silver, her posture erect from decades of teaching high school English. She placed 2 mismatched mugs on the table, a box of Earl Grey between them. The domestic normalcy of it was the final trigger. The first sob tore out of me like something physical. Then there was no stopping them. I put my head in my hands and cried, great, heaving, ugly cries that shook my whole body. I cried for the 15 years, for the lost trust, for the boy with Marcus's eyes, for the sheer audacity of the lie. I cried until my throat was raw and my sleeves were damp. Ellie did not hug me. She did not pat my back and make soothing noises. She sat across from me, waiting. She poured the hot water over the tea bags and pushed one mug toward me. The steam rose in a thin, fragrant curl. When my cries subsided into shaky hiccups, I reached for a napkin from the holder and wiped my face. My carefully applied makeup was a ruin. I didn't care. "Marcus," I managed to say, my voice raspy. I gathered that much, Ellie said dryly. Is he dead? Please tell me he's dead and your tears are just for the paperwork. A choked laugh escaped me. No, worse. I looked at her, my best friend since I was a nervous freshman, and she was the unflappable senior who took me under her wing. He has another family, Ellie, a son, a woman named Denise, for years. Her face went very still. All the warmth and humor drained from it, replaced by a flinty comprehension. She didn't gasp or express disbelief. Ellie had seen too much of life for that. She simply absorbed the information, her eyes never leaving mine. Proof. I nodded, sipping the tea. It was scalding, but the pain was clarifying. I found the phone last night. I have everything. Texts, photos, bank details, everything. And he doesn't know you know. I tested him this morning. I told him about the text. He lied to my face. He's handling it. My voice broke on the last words. Ellie was silent for a full minute. She stirred her tea, the spoon making a quiet asterisk tink asterisk against the ceramic. Then she looked up. So, what are you going to do? The question hung in the air. I don't know, I whispered. I feel like I'm made of glass. I could scream. I could throw every plate in that house. I could confront him and watch him lie again. You could, Ellie agreed. And then what? He'd spin a story. You'd be the hysterical wife. He'd protect his assets. You'd be left with nothing but a broken heart and a mess. She leaned forward, her elbows on the table. Valerie Johnson, you are not a glass woman. You are a smart woman. The smartest I know. He has been playing a game with you as a pawn for years. Are you going to shatter on the board, or are you going to learn the rules and start playing for yourself? Her words were a shock of cold water. The self-pity began to recede, burned away by a spark of something else. Anger, yes, but a focused, clarifying anger. What are you saying? I'm saying let's not just cry. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a fresh, yellow legal pad. She centered it on the table between us. She took a pen from behind her ear. Let's get smart. Let's make a plan. She looked at me, her gaze unwavering. This is a war, Val, and the first rule of war is intelligence. You have the intelligence. Now we need strategy. Objective 1, secure your position. That means money, a lawyer, and documentation. Objective 2, expose the truth on your terms in a way that leaves you standing strong and him exposed. Objective 3, build your new life from the rubble of his lies. I stared at the blank legal pad. The title line was empty, waiting. My tears were drying on my cheeks. The hollow, shattered feeling was still there, but it was now surrounded by a growing structure of intention. Where do I start? My voice was quiet, but it was no longer a whisper. Ellie smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a general surveying a map. You start by writing everything down. Names, dates, account numbers. Then tomorrow you start calling lawyers, not the flashy ones downtown. The smart, ruthless ones who specialize in dissolution of marriage with complex assets. We find you a shark, Valerie, and then we feed him. She pushed the pad toward me. I picked up the pen. My hand no longer shook. At the top of the page, I wrote a single word, operations. The grief was not gone. It was a room in my heart I had closed and locked for now. In the forefront was Ellie's kitchen, the steam from our tea, and the beginning of a blueprint for survival. For revenge. The quiet, meticulous kind that leaves no fingerprints until it's too late. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said, let's begin. The legal pad from Ellie's kitchen now lived in a locked drawer in my home office, a drawer that had previously held only spare stationery and old fabric swatches. The first page, titled Operations Asterisk, was filled with my neat, methodical handwriting. It was not a journal of pain. It was a checklist. The first item was, financial audit full picture. Marcus handled our household finances. It was an arrangement born from his career as a financial advisor and my general disinterest in spreadsheets. I had always trusted his competence. Now, that trust was my vulnerability. I needed to see what he had built, and more importantly, what he had hidden. My opportunity came on Tuesday. Marcus had a late client dinner, a fact I verified by checking the second phone's messages, a new, grim nightly ritual. I sat at his desk in the study. His computer required a password. I tried the same simple code from the second phone. 1234. It worked. His arrogance was a consistent flaw. I navigated to our online banking portal. The main joint checking and savings accounts were familiar. Healthy balances, consistent deposits from his firm and my design business. Nothing seemed amiss. I opened the tab for statements and expanded the search to all accounts under his social security number. That is where I found them. 2 accounts at a different bank. A savings account and a checking account, both opened 4 years ago. The statements were not paperless. They were being mailed somewhere else. I could view them online. The savings account had a steady, automated transfer of $1,500 from our joint account on the 3rd of every month. The destination was labeled investment diversification. It was not an investment. It was a salary for his other life. The checking account showed regular debit card purchases. A grocery store chain I didn't recognize in a suburb across town. Payments to a pediatric dental group. Charges from a family-friendly pizza chain. A monthly mortgage payment to a lender I'd never heard of. I took pictures of every screen with my phone. I noted the account numbers, the routing information, the exact amounts. My hands were cold, but they did not tremble. This was not a discovery of the heart, it was reconnaissance. Next, I looked at credit cards. We had 3 joint cards. The statements were lengthy, but I searched for anomalies. Charges for hotels during his supposed financial conferences. 2 dinners at an expensive steakhouse on a night he told me he was working late. A receipt for a child's bicycle from a toy store I'd never been to. I cross-referenced everything with the calendar on his phone, which synced to his computer. Every lie had a corresponding entry. Client dinner, golf with Tim, overnight in Chicago for seminar. I worked for 3 hours. By the time I heard the garage door open, I had logged out, cleared the browser history, and was in the living room reading a design magazine. The file on my own computer, password protected and backed up to a secure cloud drive, had grown significantly. "Long dinner?" I asked, looking up as he walked in. "The client loves to talk," he sighed, loosening his tie. "You know how it is. Anything interesting happen here?" "Not really," I said, turning a page. "Quiet night. Did you get the sea bass?" He paused. Yeah, it was good." He hadn't. The receipt I'd seen was for a porterhouse steak for 2. "Good," I said, smiling. "You deserve it." The next day, I met Ellie at a small, anonymous cafe far from our neighborhood. I laid out printouts of the financial records. She put on her reading glasses and scanned them, her lips pressed into a thin line. $1,500 a month automatically, she muttered, tapping the savings account statement. "That's the anchor, proof of sustained, hidden financial support. And the mortgage, he's on the hook for 2 houses. She looked at me. "You understand what this means? You're not just entitled to half of what's in your joint accounts. You're entitled to a share of the assets he's been siphoning off to support this other family. He's been dissipating marital funds." The term was cold and legal. It felt powerful. "So what's the next step on the list?" I asked. "The lawyer," she said without hesitation. "You have the evidence. Now you need the weapon. We need someone who knows how to use this." Finding the right lawyer took a week of discreet inquiries. I didn't want a friendly neighborhood mediator. I wanted a tactical mind. Ellie, through her vast network of former students and community connections, found a name: Rosalind Sharp. Her firm, Sharp and Associates, had a reputation for being quiet, ruthless, and exceptionally thorough in complex marital dissolutions. My consultation was in a modern, quiet office in the city. Ms. Sharp was a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor and eyes that missed nothing. I laid out my folder of evidence: the financial records, the screenshots from the second phone, the timeline I had constructed. She reviewed the documents in silence for a long time. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Johnson, this is a substantial body of evidence indicating fraud on the marital estate and intentional dissipation of assets. My first question is, what is your immediate goal?" My voice was steady. "My immediate goal is to secure my financial future, to ensure he cannot hide or move any more assets. My long-term goal is to dissolve the marriage from a position of strength, with this information being revealed on my terms." She nodded, a hint of approval in her gaze. "Good. Then we proceed strategically. We will file for divorce, but we will not serve him immediately. First, we obtain a temporary restraining order that freezes all accounts, including these hidden ones. We subpoena records from the second bank. We build an airtight financial picture before he knows he's in a fight. Your role is to continue as you are. Give him no indication. Can you do that? Yes, I said. The word felt solid. There will be a retainer, she said, statting a figure. It was significant, but it was an investment in my future. I wrote the check from my personal business account, an account Marcus rarely looked at. One more thing, I said as I stood to leave. The other woman, Denise, do we involve her? Ms. Sharp placed her palms flat on the desk. Not directly, not yet. She is a beneficiary of his fraud, but she may also be a victim of his deception. Our focus is him, his actions, his assets. She is a piece of the puzzle, not the target. The target is your husband's financial control and his facade of integrity. We dismantle that, and everything else becomes secondary. I left her office with a sense of concrete purpose. The law was not an abstract concept. It was a tool, a system of rules. I was beginning to understand its levers and pulleys. The grief was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was being overpowered by the deliberate clicks of a plan falling into place. I was no longer just following the money. I was building a cage with it. And Marcus, blissfully unaware, was still walking right into the center. Leaving Rosalind Sharp's office, the retainer check written, I felt a shift. The planning phase was over. The acquisition phase had begun. I had the legal framework. Now I needed to fortify it with irrefutable, time-stamped proof that a judge could not ignore. The second phone was a treasure trove, but it was a physical object he could destroy or claim was fabricated. I needed to create a digital shadow of his secret life, one that existed independently of that cheap piece of plastic. This required new skills. My expertise lay in color palettes and furniture layouts, not digital forensics. But I was a quick study, and I had Ellie, who was surprisingly savvy for a retired English teacher. The internet is a library, she said when I expressed my anxiety, and we're looking for a very specific set of instructions. We started in her living room with her laptop. I described what I needed, a way to document the phone's contents comprehensively in a way that preserved dates and times. We need screenshots, Ellie said, but organized, and we need to understand if there's a way to see the messages as they come in without having the physical phone. The latter seemed like a fantasy, but a careful search of reputable tech support forums yielded a concept: mirroring. If I could access the phone's backup to a cloud service, I might see its data. The phone was a basic Android. Marcus would have had to set up a Google account for it. I had the phone in my hand for only minutes each night when he was asleep, a risky window. One night I navigated to its settings. Under Accounts, there it was, an account labeled with a variation of his name and a string of numbers. I didn't dare try to log in from another device, as it might send a notification to the phone itself. So I adapted the plan. The mirroring was a dead end, but the documentation was not. I began a nightly ritual. After midnight, when Marcus's breathing was deep, I would slip out. I would retrieve the phone from the car. In my sitting room, with the door locked, I would work. I didn't just take pictures of the screen. I recorded video. I would open a text thread with Denise, then slowly scroll from the most recent message back through months, sometimes years, capturing every exchange in one continuous, time-stamped video. I did this for the banking apps, showing the account balances and transaction histories. I did it for the photo gallery, panning slowly over pictures of birthday parties, vacations, a first day of school, a parallel childhood. I created a system. Each video file was named with the date and the content type. 2023-10-15 Denise thread scrolling. I saved them to 2 encrypted flash drives, one for me, one for Ellie, and to the secure cloud drive. The digital file's metadata would confirm the date it was created, proving I had accessed this information now, not fabricated it later. The process was tedious and emotionally brutal. Watching the slow scroll of his other life, hearing in my mind the tone of his messages, affectionate, responsible, engaged, was a fresh laceration each time. But I treated it like a job. My feelings were not relevant to the task. The task was evidence. I also began monitoring more proactively. I noted the times he would text Denise, usually late afternoon under the guise of work calls, often on Sunday evenings after our family time. I started to predict his behavior. When he said he had a late meeting on a Thursday, I would check the phone later and find a message to Denise confirming he'd be over after 7. One afternoon, Ellie came over under the pretense of reviewing fabric samples for her guest room. We sat in my office, the door closed. I showed her the growing digital archive on my laptop. "It's overwhelming," I whispered, the strain of the double life showing in my voice. "There's so much, it feels endless." "Good," Ellie said, her eyes on the screen where a video played of Marcus texting about little Lucas's soccer game. "The more overwhelming, the better. It paints the picture of a sustained, deliberate deception. A judge looks at this and doesn't see a mistake. He sees a second marriage." She pointed at the screen. "Can you get a shot of that contact entry, the one with her address?" "I have it," I said, pulling up a still image. "It's in the contacts under D Home." Ellie nodded. "That's your geographic proof. He has a second residence in his mind. Now, next step. We need to establish a pattern of financial deception that's current. Can you catch a fresh transfer?" That became my new objective. The monthly automatic transfer had already happened for this cycle. I needed to catch him making an extra manual transaction. I began checking the second phone's banking app every night, looking for new activity. A week later, I found it. A transfer from our joint account, the one I still contributed to for household expenses, to the hidden checking account. The memo read bonus reinvest. The amount was $2,000. It was dated that very day. My heart hammered, but not with pain, with triumph. This was active, current dissipation. I took a video, scrolling from our joint account statement showing the debit to the hidden checking account showing the credit, all in one seamless capture. The time stamps matched. That night I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from a buzzing, focused energy. I had done it. I had not just uncovered the past, I was documenting the present. The shadow was now as real as the object casting it. The next morning, I met Ms. Sharp for a brief update. I handed her one of the encrypted drives. "This contains video documentation of the phone's contents, captured over the last 3 weeks. The most recent file shows a transfer from our marital account to his separate account from yesterday." She plugged the drive into her computer and watched a few minutes of the scrolling messages. Her expression remained professional, but I saw a slight tightening around her eyes. "This is exceptionally thorough, Mrs. Johnson. This provides the court with a narrative. It's no longer just numbers on a statement. It's a lived double life." She ejected the drive and handed it back. "You've secured your evidence package. The foundation is complete." Driving home, I realized the midpoint had been reached. I was no longer reacting, no longer just gathering. I had become the archivist of his betrayal, and the archive was complete. The woman who had sobbed on Ellie's kitchen floor was gone. In her place was a curator of cold facts. The grief was now a quiet, managed room. The front of the house was occupied by something else, a quiet, patient certainty. The evidence was my armor, and I had just finished forging every plate. Now it was time to see how it held up under pressure. With the evidence secured and my legal position fortified, a new phase began. The silent audit was over. Now, it was time to introduce a few whispers of chaos into Marcus's meticulously ordered other life. The goal was not to destroy it yet, but to stress it. To make the walls of his secret world vibrate just enough for him to feel it, but not enough for him to find the source. My tool was a prepaid, burn phone I purchased with cash from a store across town. My first intervention was simple, almost elegant in its cruelty. I knew from the second phone's calendar that he had made a reservation for 3 at a popular lakeside restaurant for the coming Saturday. A family dinner with Denise and Lucas. From my burner phone, I called the restaurant on Friday afternoon. "Hi, I'm calling to confirm a reservation for tomorrow under Johnson," I said, my voice slightly altered, warmer, younger. "Yes, for 3 at 7 p.m., the hostess confirmed. "Wonderful. Actually, there's been a change. Mr. Johnson asked me to cancel it. A work emergency has come up. He's very sorry." "Of course, I'll cancel that for you." Thank you so much. I hung up. That was it. A small, unseen snip in the fabric of his plans. I monitored the second phone that night. Just after 6, a message from Denise popped up. Are we still on for dinner tomorrow? Marcus's reply came a few minutes later. Of course, 7 p.m. Why? Just confirming. I thought maybe with work asterisk. No, it's all set. I sat in my sitting room, a glass of water in my hand, and waited. The restaurant would be busy on a Saturday. They likely wouldn't call him to reconfirm a cancellation. Saturday evening, I watched the phone. At 7:15 p.m., a string of messages arrived. Denise, we're here. They say the reservation was canceled. Marcus, what? That's impossible. Hold on. Denise, the hostess said a woman called yesterday to cancel. Said it was a work emergency. Marcus, I didn't have anyone call. This is a mistake. Let me talk to the manager. Denise, don't bother. There's a wait of an hour now. Lucas is hungry. We're going to the pizza place. Marcus, I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know what happened. Denise, just meet us there. I could imagine the scene. His confusion, her irritation, the disappointed child. A minor fissure. The following week, I targeted his communications. I signed his other phone's number up for a few promotional text services, a car warranty offer, a political survey, a local gym blast. The messages would ping at all hours. He couldn't ignore them without risk of missing something from Denise. He would have to manage them, explain them. I began to observe the effects in my own home. Marcus became more distracted. He took more calls in his office with the door firmly closed, his voice a low, tense murmur. One evening, I was passing by and heard him through the door. I don't know how they got the number. No, it's not a big deal, just spam. Yes, I'll take care of it. A pause. Because it's my phone, Denise, I'll handle it. Just drop it, okay? His tone was sharp, strained. I continued down the hallway, a faint, cold sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. He was starting to feel the pressure. The compartmentalization was requiring more effort. I shared the updates with Ellie during our now regular walks in a park far from our neighborhood. The restaurant was a good start, she said, her breath forming a small cloud in the crisp air. It introduces doubt. It makes him look incompetent or inattentive to her. And the spam, that's a classic. It's noise. It frays the edges. He's snapping at her, I reported. I heard him through the door. He told her to drop it. Good, Ellie said bluntly. Stress reveals the true person. He's been playing the devoted partner to both of you. Let's see how devoted he is when his perfect logistics break down. What's next? The money, I said. A small financial glitch. Ms. Sharp has the restraining order ready to file, but that's the nuclear option. I want something smaller first. With Ellie's help, I drafted an anonymous email. Using a free account, I sent a message to the Human Resources Department of the bank where he had the hidden accounts. The email was vague, but concerning. I am writing to report a potential conflict of interest regarding one of your clients, Marcus Johnson. He is a financial advisor who may be commingling client funds with personal accounts at your institution. I suggest an internal review of accounts, ending in XXXX and XXXX, for unusual activity. We sent it from a library computer. We did not expect a full investigation from a single tip, but the goal was to plant a seed. To have someone, somewhere in that bank, possibly flag his accounts for a routine glance. To make his secret financial haven feel slightly less secure. A few days later, I checked the second phone's banking app. There was no visible change, but that night, Marcus was agitated. He paced the living room, his personal phone to his ear. I'm just asking if there were any flags or holds. No, I'm not suggesting anything. I just forget it. It's fine. He was checking. The seed had sprouted a tiny root of paranoia. The unraveling was a slow, meticulous process. I was not pulling a thread and watching it all come apart in a rush. I was gently loosening several threads, one by one, watching the fabric of his double life slowly lose its taut, perfect weave. His absences from our home grew more frequent, his explanations thinner. He was putting out fires I had lit, and he didn't even know they were arson. One night he came home very late, I was reading in bed. He didn't come upstairs. I went down to find him in the dark kitchen, staring into the refrigerator's light, a bottle of beer in his hand. He looked tired, older. "Rough night?" I asked, my voice soft with faux concern. He jumped, startled. "Val, yeah, client stuff, just complications." "I'm sorry," I said, moving to get a glass of water. "Anything I can do?" "No," he said, too quickly. He took a long drink. "It's just things are getting tangled. Hard to keep it all straight sometimes." I nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure it is." I took my water and started back upstairs. "Don't stay up too late." From the hallway, I allowed myself a single, silent exhale. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement. The psychological warfare was working. He was feeling the strain of the web he himself had woven, and I was just beginning to apply the pressure. The following Wednesday was the monthly church potluck. Normally, I approached these events with a sense of dutiful socializing. Now I saw it as a strategic opportunity. My legal and digital foundations were set. Marcus was off balance. It was time to build my social fortress. When the truth erupted, I would not be standing alone in the blast zone. I needed allies, not just in Ellie, but in the community that had seen us as a unit for 15 years. I needed to carefully fracture that perception, on my terms. I made my famous peach cobbler, the one everyone always requested. The act of mixing the dough, slicing the fruit, was meditative. I was not baking for Marcus's colleagues or for a facade. I was baking for my future. The church hall was bustling, long tables laden with casseroles, fried chicken, and salads. I placed my cobbler at the end of the dessert table. I circulated, complimenting dishes, asking after grandchildren. I was looking for specific faces. The first was Lorraine Mitchell. She was in her 70s, a former school principal, and the church's most respected elder. She was also discreet and possessed a fierce sense of justice. I found her arranging plates near the coffee urn. "Lorraine, that squash casserole looks divine," I said, stopping beside her. "Valerie, honey, thank you. You look a little peaked. Everything all right?" Her eyes, sharp behind her glasses, held genuine concern. This was my opening. I let my smile falter just for a second. I glanced around, as if ensuring we weren't overheard. "It's been a rough few weeks, Lorraine. To be honest, I'm struggling." She immediately put down the stack of plates. "Come with me. Let's get some air before the rush." She led me to a quiet corner of the hallway outside the hall. The sounds of laughter and clattering dishes were muffled. "Now, what's going on?" she asked, her voice low and direct. I did not tell her everything. I gave her the core truth, stripped of my plans. "I found out Marcus has been unfaithful for a long time. There's another family." My voice trembled, but the tears that welled up were not entirely manufactured. The humiliation of saying it aloud to someone from my community was real. Lorraine's face hardened. She did not gasp or cry out. She placed a firm, dry hand over mine. "Are you certain?" "I have proof, a lot of it." She nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I see. And what are you going to do?" "I've retained a lawyer. I'm protecting myself. But the social part," I let the sentence hang. "You're worried about the gossip, about being the subject of pity," she stated. "Yes." Lorraine squeezed my hand. "This church is a family, and families protect their own. You have been a cornerstone here, Valerie. Your work with the food pantry, your kindness. He has been a face in a pew. Do you understand me?" I understood perfectly. She was drawing a line between my contributions and his mere presence. "I don't want a scene, Lorraine. Not yet." "And you won't have one, but you also won't walk through this alone. When you are ready, people will know the truth, the right people." She released my hand. "You have my support, and my silence until you say otherwise." "Thank you," I said, the words thick with real emotion. The second person was Ben Carter, a jovial, retired contractor who headed the church's building committee, which Marcus had chaired for years. I caught him as he was loading his plate. "Ben, could I ask a small favor? The gutter on the east side of our house is sagging. I was wondering if you could recommend someone reliable. Marcus has been so busy lately, it slips his mind." Ben's cheerful expression dimmed slightly. Sure, Val, I can take a look myself next week. Say Tuesday. Marcus won't be around. He has a lot of evening commitments these days, I said, layering just a hint of weary confusion into my tone. I'm never quite sure of his schedule anymore. Ben, a man who valued reliability above all, gave a slow nod. I see. Well, don't you worry about it. I'll handle it. You shouldn't have to think about gutters. The third connection was more public. During the meal, I sat with a group of women around my age. The conversation turned to upcoming summer plans. We're not sure, I said when asked. Marcus's schedule is so unpredictable this year. I might just take a small trip by myself, a little quiet time. There were understanding nods. One woman, Sarah, who had recently gone through a difficult divorce, met my eyes across the table. She said nothing, but later, as we were clearing up, she brushed past me and murmured, "If you ever need to talk to someone who gets it, call me." She slipped a piece of paper with her number into my apron pocket. The effect on Marcus was subtle but immediate. He moved through the crowd as he always did, shaking hands, clapping shoulders. But I noticed the interactions were shorter. Lorraine gave him a polite but distant nod before turning away to talk to someone else. Ben Carter, when Marcus approached him to discuss the roof fund, listened politely but didn't engage in their usual lengthy banter. "I'll get those figures to you, Marcus. Excuse me, I promised Val I'd look at her gutter." I saw Marcus pause, a flicker of confusion on his face. He was being politely, efficiently sidelined. No one was rude. No one said a word against him, but the warmth was gone, replaced by a formal civility. He was becoming a man people were starting to feel sorry for, though they didn't know why yet. On the drive home, he was quiet. "Everything okay with Ben?" he finally asked. He seemed off. "I think he's just preoccupied," I said, looking out the window. "He's going to come by Tuesday to look at that sagging gutter. I hope that's all right. I know you've been busy." "I could have handled that," he said, a defensive edge in his voice. "I know, but you weren't, honey, and it needed doing." My tone was gentle, reasonable, the concerned wife. He didn't reply. He could feel the shift, a change in the social atmosphere he couldn't name. His currency, charm, reliability, the appearance of stability, was being quietly devalued, and he didn't know who was manipulating the market. That night, as I lay beside him, I thought of Lorraine's hand on mine, of Sarah's slip of paper, of Ben's quiet offer to help. These were not just gestures of sympathy. They were bricks in a wall of support I was building around myself. Marcus had his secret family, a hollow replica of domesticity. I was fortifying my real one. The community wasn't just a backdrop to our life. It was a living organism, and I had just begun to carefully redirect its energy. His world was shrinking, under stress and suspicion. Mine, though wounded, was expanding in quiet, solid ways. The casseroles and the bread were not just food. They were the currency of care, and I was ensuring the account was in my name. The community shield was in place. The subtle distancing at the potluck had been a test, and it had worked. Now it was time for the final performance. I chose a Friday night. Marcus had been tense all week, snapping at minor inconveniences, his phone a constant source of quiet anxiety. He mentioned that his weekend golf trip with clients had been canceled. It was perfect. I spent the afternoon preparing. I made his favorite meal, herb-crusted rack of lamb, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus. I set the dining room table with our wedding china, the crystal water goblets, the heavy silver. I lit candles. I selected a bottle of expensive Bordeaux from the cellar. It was a celebration of sorts, though not the one he would expect. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, my pearls, my hair smoothed back. I looked in the mirror and saw not a wife, but an executive preparing for a decisive board meeting. Marcus came home, loosening his tie. He stopped in the dining room doorway, taking in the scene. "What's all this?" he asked, a wary smile on his face. "Did I forget an anniversary?" "No," I said, entering with the wine to decant it. "I just thought we could use a nice evening. It's been a stressful few weeks for both of us." I poured a small amount into a glass, tasted it, nodded. "This is ready." He seemed to relax, the familiar script of domestic luxury reassuring him. "This is amazing, Val. Thank you." He took his seat at the head of the table. We ate, the food was excellent. The conversation was stilted but polite. I asked about his work. He gave vague answers. I talked about a potential new client. He nodded distractedly. The air was thick with everything unsaid, a low hum beneath the clink of cutlery. When the plates were cleared and we were sipping the last of the wine, I looked at him across the candlelight. My pulse was steady. My hands were cool and dry where they rested on the tablecloth. "Marcus," I began, my voice calm, conversational. "I want to thank you for 15 interesting years." His smile was confused. "Where's this coming from?" "I've learned so much," I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "About design, about running a household, about trust. And lately I've learned even more, about financial management, about digital documentation, about the importance of community." His smile faded. A watchful stillness came over him. "Val, what are you talking about?" I reached beside my chair, where I had placed a simple manila envelope earlier. I laid it on the table between us. "I'm talking about closure." He stared at the envelope. "What is that?" "Open it." His eyes flicked from the envelope to my face, searching for a clue. He saw only calm resolve. He picked it up, his movements slow. He undid the clasp and pulled out the contents. On top was a standard legal document. His eyes scanned the heading. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." His face went pale. He looked up, shock giving way to a blustery anger. "What is this? What are you doing?" "Read the next page," I said, taking a sip of water. Beneath the petition was a photograph. I had printed it in color on high-gloss paper. It was the picture from the second phone of Marcus, Denise, and Lucas, grinning at the camera on a beach. The boy was on Marcus's shoulders. It was a happy family portrait. Marcus's breath left his body in a rush. The color drained from his face completely, leaving a waxy, ashen mask. His hands began to shake. The papers fluttered. "I know about Denise," I said, my tone still even, instructional. "I know about Lucas. I know about the house, the mortgage, the $1,500 a month, the school fees, the pizza nights, the dentist appointments. I know about the second phone in the spare tire well. I've known for weeks." He was speechless, his mouth opening and closing, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen in him before. It was the terror of a man whose entire constructed world has just been vaporized. "How?" he finally choked out. "The text message wasn't a prank," I explained simply. "It was a tip. I checked, I found it, and then I checked everything else. Your computer password is embarrassingly simple, by the way." He dropped the papers as if they were on fire. "Val, baby, I can explain." "There is no explanation that matters," I said, cutting him off. My voice remained steady, devoid of anger or tears. "The facts are laid out in that petition, and in the supporting documents my lawyer has already filed with the court. All joint and individual accounts have been frozen as of 4 p.m. today. The temporary restraining order is in effect. You cannot move, hide, or dissipate any marital assets. Your financial advisor's license may also be reviewed, given the commingling I've documented." I was reciting a checklist. Each item was a nail in the coffin of his old life. He pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping harshly on the hardwood. "You can't do this, you bitch, you scheming, sneaky bitch." His voice rose to a shout, the charm utterly gone, replaced by raw panic and rage. "I can and I have," I said, standing up as well. I was shorter than him, but I felt taller in that moment. "The papers are served. This marriage is over. You will deal with my attorney, Rosalind Sharp, from now on. You are not to contact me directly unless it is through her." "You'll get nothing," he roared, spittle flying. "I'll fight you, I'll ruin you." "You already tried to ruin me," I said, my voice dropping to something cold and final. "You just didn't succeed. The evidence I have is comprehensive. Texts, photos, videos, financial records. A judge will see it. Our friends will see it. Your colleagues will see it. You can fight, but you will lose. And you will be exposed." The word exposed hung in the air. He seemed to crumple in on himself, the anger deflating into a desperate confusion. What do you want?" "I want you to leave," I said, gesturing to the door. "Tonight, take a bag. You will not return until a formal schedule for retrieving your belongings is arranged through our lawyers. You have other places to stay, I believe." He stood there, shaking, looking from me to the damning photo on the table to the legal documents. The performance was over. The mask was not just off, it was shattered on the floor between us. He had no lines left. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving him standing amidst the ruins of our Last Supper. I went upstairs to my sitting room and closed the door. I did not lock it. I simply sat in the dark, listening. I heard him moving below, heard a door slam, heard his car start in the garage. The sound of the engine faded down the street. I let out a long, slow breath. It was not a breath of relief or of sorrow. It was the breath of a person who has just completed a complex, difficult task. The point of no return had been crossed. The confrontation was documented, the lines drawn. The next phase, the reckoning, would be louder and uglier. But the first, most important blow had been struck on my terms, in my dining room, with my evidence. I had taken back the narrative. Now it was his turn to live in the chaos of the truth. The sound of his car faded into the night. The house was now silent, a different kind of silence than before. It was not the quiet of waiting, but the quiet after a storm has passed through. I sat in the dark of my sitting room for an hour, listening to the absence of him. Then I moved. I did not sleep in our bed. I slept in the guest room on crisp, unfamiliar sheets. My sleep was shallow but uninterrupted by his presence. At 7 a.m., I was in the kitchen making coffee when my personal phone rang. It was him. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times. Then the house phone rang. I unplugged it from the wall. I had expected this. The initial shock would wear off, replaced by a frantic need to regain control. I had prepared for it. My suitcase was already packed and waiting in the guest room closet. A box of essential documents and my backup drives were by the front door. My plan was to stay at Ellie's for the immediate aftermath, as Ms. Sharp had advised. A physical separation strengthened my legal position and my personal safety. At 9:30, his key turned in the front door. He had not taken it from his key ring. I was standing in the living room, wearing jeans and a sweater, my suitcase beside me. He looked terrible, his clothes rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He had not shaved. The confident facade was utterly gone. "Val," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk, please." "There is nothing to talk about," I said, my tone flat. "All communication goes through Ms. Sharp." "Don't do this," he pleaded, taking a step forward. "It was a mistake, a long, stupid mistake. I ended it. I swear to you, I ended it with her last night. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything." I looked at him, seeing the performance for what it was. The lies were so ingrained he probably believed them himself in that moment. "You ended it last night, after I served you papers. How convenient. And what about your son, Marcus? Do you end him too?" He flinched as if struck. "That's low. He's a child." "Yes, he is. And you have financial obligations to him that the court will now formalize. That is between you, Denise, and the state. It is no longer my concern, except as it pertains to the dissipation of my marital assets." He switched tactics, his voice hardening. "You think you're so clever, you think you have everything. You have no idea what you're starting. I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure you get nothing but legal bills. I'll tell everyone you drove me to it, that you were cold, distant, that our marriage was dead long before Denise." I felt a cold spike of anger, but I kept it contained. "You are welcome to try. My lawyer has already filed motions for temporary support and to have you cover my legal fees due to your misconduct. As for what you tell people," I gestured to my phone on the coffee table, "I have recorded every conversation in this house since the day after I found the phone, including last night's dinner, and this one. Your threats are on record. Your admission of a long, stupid mistake is on record. Tell whatever story you like. I have the evidence to refute it." His face paled again. He had not considered that. The paranoia I had seeded was now in full bloom. He looked around the room as if seeing microphones in every corner. "You're insane," he whispered. "No, I am thorough." I picked up my coat from the armchair. "I am leaving now. I will be staying with a friend. You have 30 minutes to pack a larger bag. After that, I am changing the locks. If you attempt to enter after the locks are changed, I will call the police and file for a personal protection order. Do you understand?" He stared at me, a mixture of hatred and utter bewilderment in his eyes. The man who had managed 2 families could not manage this one confrontation. "You'll regret this, Valerie. You'll be alone, you'll see." "I was already alone," I said, the truth of it sharp and clear. "I just didn't know it." I wheeled my suitcase to the door, picked up my box. "Your 30 minutes start now." I walked out without looking back. I loaded my car and drove away from the house that had been my gilded cage. I did not cry. I watched the familiar streets pass, feeling a lightness that was not happiness, but the absence of a tremendous, invisible weight. Ellie was waiting on her porch. She took my suitcase without a word and led me inside to the same cozy kitchen where this had all truly begun. She had made up the guest room. A pot of tea was steeping. "He came," I stated. "And?" He ran the gamut, begging, blamming, threatening. He's scared. "Good," Ellie said, pouring the tea. "Scared people make mistakes. Your lawyer called while you were on your way. The temporary support hearing is scheduled for next week. Marcus has been formally served with the restraining orders freezing the accounts. He can't touch anything." I sat down, the adrenaline beginning to ebb, leaving a deep fatigue. "He said he'd tell everyone I drove him to it, that I was cold." Ellie snorted. "Let him. Lorraine Mitchell called me this morning. She's already spoken to 3 other ladies from the prayer group. The word support was used, not pity. Support. When he starts his version, it will sound like the pathetic lies of a caught man to people who have already chosen a side." That was the final piece of the reckoning. Not just the legal confrontation, but the social one. He was isolated. I was not. His threats were empty because I had systematically removed their power. The next few days were a blur of legal calls and quiet stability at Ellie's. Marcus's lawyer, a harried-looking man, contacted Ms. Sharp. The tone was initially aggressive, then, after seeing the evidence file, it became conciliatory. Offers of settlement began to surface, trying to avoid a public trial. Ms. Sharp relayed them to me with a note of satisfaction. "They want this to go away quietly. They know they're on the wrong side of the facts." I instructed her to proceed, but with no rush. Let him sweat. Let him live in the limbo he had created for me. The reckoning was not a single event. It was a process, and I was in control of its pace. The man who had controlled every detail of his double life now had control over nothing, not his money, not his home, not his reputation. The consequences had arrived, and they were wearing my face. Settlement was finalized 6 weeks after I served the papers. There was no dramatic court trial. Marcus's lawyer, faced with the video evidence, the financial audit, and the prospect of his client's professional reputation dissolving, advised him to agree to my terms. I received the full buyout of my share of the marital home, a significant portion of the investment portfolio, and a lump sum representing the dissipated assets he had sent to Denise. My business accounts remained mine alone. Rosalind Sharp called it a textbook outcome. I called it the foundation. With the funds secured, I began looking for a house. Not a showplace, but a home. Ellie came with me to every viewing. We saw many places that were too large, too reminiscent of my old life, or too full of other people's ghosts. Then we saw the bungalow on Maple Lane. It was smaller, older, with a slightly overgrown garden and a porch that needed painting. The interior had good bones, but was dated. The living room was flooded with afternoon light. I could see my furniture there. I could breathe there. "This is it," I said to Ellie, standing in the empty kitchen. "It needs work," she observed, running a hand over the old countertop. "I know," I said, "my work." I made an offer that day. It was accepted. The closing was swift, facilitated by my new, unencumbered finances. On the day I got the keys, I went alone. I stood in the middle of the empty living room and listened to the silence. It was not the hollow silence of my old house. It was a quiet full of potential. It was mine. The renovation was my therapy. I did not hire a designer. I hired reliable contractors and I directed them. I chose a warm, creamy white for the walls, refinished the original hardwood floors myself, and selected fixtures that were functional and beautiful. I turned the smallest bedroom into a dedicated office for my design business. I painted it a deep, soothing blue. I made mistakes. I changed my mind about tile. It was messy and human and entirely my own. Ellie helped, showing up most days with lunch and practical advice. Ben Carter, true to his word, sent over a younger contractor he trusted to fix the porch and update the electrical. One afternoon, Lorraine Mitchell stopped by with a plant. "A peace lily," she said, handing me the pot. "They're resilient, and they tell you when they need water." The housewarming was on a Saturday in early fall. I did not cater it. I cooked with Ellie as my sous chef. We made lasagna, a big salad, garlic bread. I set up a table in the backyard, now neatly trimmed, with string lights crisscrossing above it. I invited Ellie, Lorraine, Ben and his wife, Sarah from the church, and a few other friends who had become my steadfast circle. They arrived with more food, with bottles of wine, with laughter. The house was filled with the sound of conversation, the clatter of plates, music playing softly from the kitchen speaker. People complimented the colors, the cozy feel, the light. I gave tour, pointing out what I had changed, admitting to my mistakes. It was not a performance of perfection. It was a sharing of something real. As dusk settled and the string lights glowed, I stood by the back door, a glass of wine in my hand, watching my friends in my yard. Ellie came to stand beside me. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "He's been let go from his firm. Did you hear?" I had heard. Miss Sharp had mentioned it in passing. The internal review triggered by my anonymous email, combined with the personal scandal that had begun to seep into his professional circles, had been too much. His carefully cultivated image of stability was gone. "I heard," I said. "Denise left him too," Ellie added, her voice low. "According to Lorraine, whose cousin knows a neighbor. Apparently, once the money got tight and the reality of his situation set in, the other life lost its shine. He's renting an apartment. Alone." I took a sip of my wine. I felt no triumph in that news. It was a simple fact, a consequence. His web had collapsed under its own weight. The revenge was never about destroying him. It was about removing myself as a supporting strand so that the entire structure would fall on him alone. "That's his life now," I said, "not mine." Ellie nodded, satisfied. "To new foundations," she said, raising her glass. "To new foundations," I echoed. Later, as the last guest left and Ellie helped me with the final dishes, I felt a profound sense of quiet completion. The anger was gone, processed into action and left behind. The grief had been acknowledged and given its own space, a small, quiet room inside me that I visited less and less. What remained was a steady calm. I walked Ellie to the door. "Thank you," I said, "for everything. The tea, the legal pad, the lunches, all of it." She hugged me, a quick, firm embrace. "You did the work, Val. I just handed you the tools." She pulled back and looked at me. "You're going to be more than okay." "I know," I said, and I did. After she left, I locked the door. I turned off the downstairs lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, my room in my house. It was simply furnished, with a comfortable bed and curtains I had sewn myself. The window was open, letting in the cool night air. I got into bed and lay there, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new neighborhood, a distant dog barking, the rustle of leaves in the mature trees. There was no tension in my body, no listening for another car in the garage, no deciphering the tone of a voice from another room. There was only the quiet and the space and the undeniable truth that it was all mine. I had gone from a text message in a dark kitchen to this, from a shattered woman on a garage floor to a woman who had meticulously rebuilt her world, piece by piece on her own terms. The revenge was not in his downfall, though that was a consequence. The revenge was in this peace, in this quiet strength, in this house with its fresh paint and its solid locks where I made the rules. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to tomorrow.